I was 20 years old. I was in college going into my senior year and back home living with my parents for the summer. I was on a dating app and met a girl named Riley. I think it was Bumble, but anyways, Riley and I talked for a little bit on there. Eventually, after a few hours of chatting back and forth, I got her Snapchat. We started snapping after that, which I preferred over text. Overall, Riley seemed cool but slightly odd. Some of the responses she gave or things that she said were a little bit unusual. I can't even really remember a specific example, but I just remember thinking that. I continued to talk to her and snap her, though, because I was curious to get to know her a little bit more. I was also just bored. After 2 days of snapping her, we were friendly, but I'd made no plans to hang out or anything. And I wasn't really planning to either. We weren't snapping each other back and forth like every minute or anything, just here and there. Well, it got to the point where we were just snapping blank pictures of our faces to each other. And I remember that night, I went to get food and hang out with one of my friends, Jordan. I went over to his house that was not that far away from mine, and then I arrived back home at like 10 p.m. Then I went into my bedroom and I believe snapped Riley once more as well as a few other people, and then went to bed. Well, in the middle of the night, I woke up. The first thing I remember was being really groggy and reaching for my phone at my bedside. I looked at it to see that it was almost 3 o'clock in the morning. At that point, something caught my eye. I looked to the window and saw somebody was there staring at me. I freaked out and jumped back. I then saw that it appeared to be Riley, the same girl who I had been snapping with and met on Bumble. I was so confused and thought that I had to be dreaming at first, but no, I was wide awake now. I just looked at her in horror, and she appeared to be just staring at me. It was hard to tell because my lights were all off, and it was very dark outside also, so I couldn't really see the expressions on her face or anything. I got my phone and went on Snapchat, I guess to tell her to go away from my window. I clicked on her profile and she was right next to me on the Snap map. That's when I realized that that's how she got my location. I sent her a message saying, "Why are you staring in my bedroom window? It's creepy." The message was delivered, and I then took a screenshot of her next to me on the Snap map. Several seconds after I sent the snap, she moved out of sight from the window. Probably 2 or 3 minutes after that, she opened my message but did not reply and left it on open. I got up and looked out the window but did not see her anymore. She had gone around to the other side of the house, so I left my bedroom and walked around looking out of other windows, but I couldn't see her at all anymore, and she must have actually left. I went back to my bedroom and looked to Snapchat again. Not only did she not respond to me, but I was now blocked. I was so weirded out by it, but hoped that this meant she would leave me alone, and thankfully she did. After that, I never saw or heard from her again. She was also gone from Bumble as well. I still have so many questions from that experience. Why did she do that, and what was she doing? I still have the screenshot from Snapchat, and I will never forget how creepy it was to see her at the window that night. A few years ago, my friend talked me into getting Tinder. I had been single for about 1.5 years after ending a bad relationship that lasted 3 years. But that's a story for another time. So I thought, why not give it a try? I made the account thinking if I don't like it, I can just delete it. Anyways, I've been chatting with this guy who I find really good looking, and we have a lot in common. So I agreed to meet him, but only in a public place. After talking a bit, we decided he'd come to my work during lunch, and we'd hang out. I was working at a deli in a grocery store. While I was taking orders and helping customers, I noticed a guy staring at me about 45 minutes later. He was wearing sunglasses, which was odd since we were inside, and I figured it was him. I didn't know what to do. It seemed like he wanted to stay hidden. Should I say hi? I ended up just ignoring it, thinking maybe he was checking to make sure I was who I said I was. But looking back, I realized that was giving myself too much credit. I'm not a model or anything like that. I think I'm just okay looking and a bit on the heavier side with some confidence problems. After he left, I wondered if he didn't like how I looked in person, and that's why he checked me out first. But now I understand better. About 2 hours later, he texted me saying he's outside. I replied that I'm finishing work and I'll meet him in front. It was the same guy as before, but without the glasses this time. I didn't mention or tell him I saw him earlier. It felt a bit awkward. I usually give people the benefit of the doubt and try to understand why they do things. Lunch went really well and I really liked him, so I just forgot about the earlier situation. I said I wanted to go slow, and he was cool with it. Since we both liked the Utah Jazz, he invited me to his place to watch a game after I finished work. My coworker and friend felt uneasy about it, but I told them I'd be okay. I can take care of myself. We both laughed, and then I headed to his house. When I arrived, he mentioned he had a roommate, but he wasn't around, so it would be just us two. The night was going fine until he said he needed to use the bathroom. But before I continue, let me tell you a bit about his living room. As soon as you enter, the TV is close to the front door. The living room and kitchen don't have a wall between them. It's just one big open space. The couch is in the middle, not against any wall. If you sit on the couch, you're facing the front door, and the kitchen is behind you. I hear him open the door, and I keep watching the game. I feel him come up behind the couch and put his hands on my shoulders, down to my hands, and he lifts them behind me. I thought he was just playing around, so I went along with it, but then he starts making my hands go lower and see him completely naked, with a serious face and bright blue eyes staring at me intensely. I felt really scared. All I could say was, what are you doing? Without changing his expression, he replies in a flat voice, "What do you think?" I say, I just came here to watch the game and hang out. You don't just go to a guy's house from Tinder and expect to hook up. I was shocked and disgusted, and I tell him I made it clear I want to take things slow. Furious, he walked around the couch and began yelling at me, calling me a tease. By now, I just wanted to leave. So I picked up my purse from beside the couch and started walking toward the door. When he saw what I was doing, he hurried to the door, locked both locks, and stood there. He was still naked and still aroused, insisting that I couldn't leave until I slept with him. I laughed, thinking he must be joking. This went on for 2 hours. I would try to go to the door, and he would push me away or grab the doorknob, telling me no. Now I'm in survival mode, trying to figure out what to do. My phone is dead and I don't know the area. It's been 2 hours and he still won't let me leave. I really thought he might hurt me if I didn't do what he said. So I finally told him, okay, but only if you let me go to the bathroom and freshen up. He had me go to his bathroom in his bedroom and said he was going to make us dinner and drinks, acting like nothing happened, like he just didn't spend 2 hours yelling at me. I went to the balcony they shared with the neighbors. I put my ear next to the bathroom door and could still hear him in the kitchen. I opened the bathroom door slowly, praying he wouldn't walk in or hear me. I tiptoed slowly across his bedroom to the patio. Then I heard him yell, "Are you kidding me?" I felt my heart sinking to my stomach. By now, I knew I was caught. I looked up slowly and could see him through the crack of the door. He was walking to the kitchen sink with his finger in his mouth. He cut himself. I got a boost of confidence and slowly opened his balcony door. Thank God it wasn't loud, but the confidence didn't last long. I started worrying. What if he knows his neighbors and they won't help me? What if they're not home? What if I get his attention and he pulls me back inside and who knows what might happen? I took a deep breath and knocked on their patio glass door. It felt like forever. And finally, I heard someone walk up to the door. She looked through the glass, really confused. But once she saw my face, swollen from crying and in distress, she opened the door. "Can I walk through your house to leave?" She seemed a bit puzzled. So I said, "Please, I just want to go home," trying not to cry. She guides me through her bedroom. I see a man walking into the bedroom and I jump, thinking it was my date coming to find me. But when I look up, it's a man in his 40s, looking at me confused. Then the woman. She just nods and leads me out of the front door. She gives me a pat on the back, and I say thank you as I hurry towards my car. As I'm at the bottom of the stairs, I hear a door open. I expect to see the woman when I look back, but it's my date. He's still naked, and once he sees me, he starts chasing me. It was winter in Utah, and the ground is slippery from the ice, but I don't care. I finally reach my car, get in, lock the door, and look up at the front of his apartment. He's standing there on the top of the stairs, just staring at me. Finally, he turns back around and goes inside. I guess it was too cold for him to chase me all the way to my car, so I press the gas and drive away as far as I can. I don't want to go home, so I go to my parents' place. It's about midnight now. I knock on my mom's bedroom window, tell her everything, and spend the night there. I decide not to call the cops. I just don't want to deal with it, which I regret, because I don't want it to happen to another girl. But it's been a long time, and I don't want to go through it all just for them to say there's not enough evidence. I know I made a lot of mistakes that night, but I am a completely different person now, and that's why I'll never use a dating site again. I have a really crazy story from a while back. It was a few years ago now. I'm a female, aged 23, and was 21 at the time. I was on Tinder and matched with this guy who I will call Ryan for the story. After matching, Ryan and I began talking and hit it off pretty well, but that was really only the first night. The next day, when chatting with him, I realized that he was sort of a jerk. He said a few things that were kind of rude, and overall, I just wasn't feeling it anymore. He asked me for my Snapchat, and at that point I told him no. This frustrated him a little, and he replied saying that I was making a mistake and some other stuff as well. But he then said that we should go on a date the next night. It took me by surprise, and I said, "Really?" He then gave me a time and location for the date, which was at a nearby bar, I think. After he said that, I ignored him and did not reply. I figured that he would get the idea and move on. But the next day, he sent me another message saying, "I will see you tonight," or something like that. I thought about saying, "No, you won't," but I didn't. Instead, I continued to ignore him. He didn't say anything else until that night. He sent a text on Tinder saying, "Where are you?" I figured that he was joking, but still did not reply to him. There was a text later saying, "Why didn't you show up?" I was thinking to myself, did this guy really go out on a date and expect me to show up? He just said that we were going. I never once told him that I would go with him. The next day, he sent one final message on Tinder, which said, "I'm going to find you." After that, I blocked him. I couldn't believe that I even matched with this guy in the first place anymore. So during this time, I lived in a house that I was renting with a roommate. It was smaller and had only 2 bedrooms, but we each had our own room. The very next night after that, I was home by myself as my roommate was at work. I was on my bed just messing around on my phone. It was like 11 o'clock at night or something, and all of a sudden I heard this noise. It sounded like it was coming from outside, like the bush next to the window was moving. My window was covered by a blanket from the inside, and it was only a few feet away from me. I got out of bed and then went over to the window. I lifted the blanket and instantly saw a man sort of crouched down next to the bush like 3 feet away. I jumped back and was really freaked out by this. It was probably the last thing that I was expecting to see. Afterwards, maybe 10 seconds later, I heard a noise from the window. The guy was knocking on it. I reached for my phone and hit 911 as fast as I could. I heard more noises at the window but couldn't see what was happening. After dialing, I ran out of my bedroom and headed down the hallway for the living room. When I was leaving my room and going through the doorway, I heard a loud bang from the window. He might have been trying to break it or something. I don't know. I told the 911 operator that I thought somebody may be trying to break into my house. When I was in the living room, I felt slightly safer, but not by much. I tried to get as far away from the bedroom as possible. I was told that police were on their way. I went over to one of the front windows, pulled back the curtain for a second, and looked out of it. When I did, I saw that the guy was still there and outside. He was at my same bedroom window, standing up, and I'm not sure what he was doing. But I kept watching him, and he then turned, and he saw me for a split second through the window. As he started to move, I closed the curtains and moved away. I ran to my bathroom and locked myself inside of it. There I waited until the police arrived. I couldn't really hear much from inside, but if the guy broke in, I think I would have heard that. Eventually the cops got there. When they did, I came out of my bathroom, ran for the front door and let them in. But when I did, I was told that they had caught a guy in my backyard. He was the same man who I had matched with on Tinder. I guess he had been at one of my back windows now. I don't know what his plan was. I really can't believe that it all happened. After that, I deleted Tinder. I hope if anybody who hears this uses dating apps, they're very careful. This is a story of when I met a guy on Tinder several years ago. So I matched with a guy named Mike. He had dark hair, a slight beard, and in his pictures seemed decent looking. There was not a whole lot of information about him on his profile, but after we matched, he sent me a message. At first he said hi, and I said hi back to him. He began chatting with me, very basic, saying things like, "How are you and what's up?" Things eventually improved a little bit though, and based on his profile, he seemed to be a little bit of an outdoorsman. We continued to talk, and he seemed to be pretty nice. After talking with him on and off for a couple of days, he asked to go on a date with me. I asked him what he had in mind, and he suggested a local restaurant. I decided to agree, and we were supposed to meet there the following night at 7 p.m. So the next day, I chatted with him early on and made sure that we were still on for that night, which we were. I then got ready when the time came and drove to the restaurant early. The restaurant was about 10 minutes from my house, and it seemed like a cute place that I had never been to before. There was a decent amount of other people there, but it was like 6:50, so I wasn't sure if Mike was there yet or not. I looked on Tinder and he hadn't said anything since I told him that I was leaving for the restaurant, and he said, "Sounds good." After waiting in my car until 7 p.m., I decided to enter the restaurant. Maybe he was already inside, or maybe he was still driving. I went inside and got a table and told the waiter that I was waiting for someone. I then sent a text message to Mike saying that I was there and had a table. Several minutes went by and he didn't respond. I was beginning to get frustrated. Soon it was 7:15 and I messaged him again asking what was going on. He didn't respond to that either. I stayed there until 7:30 and then left the restaurant. I went out to my car and then left to drive home. I was very frustrated, but as I began to drive back though, I noticed about halfway that a car was behind me for a while. I don't really remember it leaving the restaurant with me because I wasn't looking behind me, but I did remember it being on the first road, and then when I turned, it went with me. After the next turn, it was still there, but I didn't actually think that the person was following me until I made it all the way to my street. That's when I turned and the car did as well. My street is residential and generally very quiet. There are not typically a lot of people that drive down it, so when the car turned, it really raised my eyebrows. I went to my house, which is the fourth one down on the left side. I pulled into the driveway and the car kept going very slowly, but kept going. I parked, got out, and then watched the car as I went inside. It crept down the street very slowly. I never got a good look at who was driving, though, because it was so dark out. I'm not going to lie, though, the thought of it being Mike did cross my mind. But quickly I pushed that thought away as it being too crazy. I looked on Tinder when I got back inside and Mike still hadn't said anything. I sent him one more message saying, "What happened? Why didn't you show up?" Then I decided I should just move on. It's not like I really knew Mike that well at all. I was just really annoyed that he had made the date and then failed to show up entirely. So I made some pasta for myself and then went into the living room. I lived alone at the time and was eating in my living room when I noticed what appeared to be the same car driving by again. Now this was like 30 minutes at least after I had arrived back home. The car was going the other way down the street, but when it got in front of my house, it stopped. It pulled over to the side of the road, and I kept watching from the window very carefully so that I wasn't visible to whoever was in the car. It was definitely the same car that had followed me home. The engine was running for a while and then it turned off. I did not hesitate, and I called the police right there. I told them that I thought I was followed home by someone, and now they were parked out front of my house. I kept an eye on the car, and nobody got out of it. I still had no clue as to who was driving. After speaking with the 911 operator, I kept watching out the window and waited. The car remained there and nobody got out. All the lights to the car were off. There was just a dim street light in the nearby area. For the next 10 minutes, nothing changed. Then I saw a police car start to drive down my street. It got near the car that was parked out front of my house, and then the police car turned its lights on. The officer got out and talked to the driver. I kept watching as he spoke with the driver for probably 5 minutes. Finally, the car drove away. The officers then came up to my front door and spoke with me. He said that the driver claimed to be lost and had just pulled over to look up directions. He said that he didn't follow me home. I knew that was a lie. And I pulled up Mike's Tinder and asked him if he looked like that by chance. The officer said yes, that was him. I couldn't believe it. Mike had followed me home. I spoke with the officer about it, but he said not much could be done unless he returned or something. The officer told me that he asked Mike to leave, but didn't force him, and Mike said that he would not come back. He then said if Mike came back to give him a call. After that, the officer left, and I was a little worried that Mike would return, but he didn't. It still creeped me out, though. I blocked Mike on Tinder after that. I still can't believe that he followed me all the way home after ignoring me. I'm glad that since that night, I've never heard from him or saw him again. I'm glad that since that night, I've never heard from him or saw him again.